Welcome to Tough Topics in LD. Sean, we've managed to get some guests. This is incredible.
It is. It's a wonder. It's amazing. It's a miracle.
And a Christmas miracle.
And it's that time.
So yeah, my name is Alistair Beverley, and joined by always and supported by Sean, who has frozen just as we started recording. This is perfect. And our mantra is unplanned, unscripted, but not unprofessional. And Sean looks like he's doing that. That's all, folks. From
Time of year.
But you're back, Sean. Sean, you've frozen in quite a hilarious position there for a moment. Just as I was telling that we're unplanned, unscripted, but not unprofessional. It fitted perfectly with our sort of make-up as we go along mantra. But today, I think the title we sort of came up with was is it Giving a Shit, Pee, Poop and Pelvic Health? And we're joined by the world-renowned Elaine Miller, award-winning physiotherapist and pelvic health guru, and a lady who has 13 years of physiotherapy, 13 years of specialist physiotherapy experience working with people with learning disabilities, and she is an amazing runner, part record holder at 32 weeks pregnant, part run record holder, Kirsty Huntington.
Hello.
So, you know, I just thought we'd sort of kick off. Elaine, do you want to introduce yourself? For those of you who are not aware about, you and your work in the physio world, you're a bit of a legend, but some people may not be aware about the work you do.
I think making fart jokes seems to have diverted my career from any sensible path. So I'm a pelvic health physio. So my area that I work in is anything in the pelvis. So most of my clinic days are spent guddling around with leaky ladies. So anybody that presents with fecal or urinary incontinence, sexual dysfunction or pelvic pain, then they'll end up getting referred to us. And it's a really good field to work in because there's lots of evidence that supports it. So the problem with it though is because incontinence is quite embarrassing for most people, then it's really difficult to get them to come into clinic. So only about 25% of people that wet or poo themselves ever seek help about it, which I'm really interested in the subclinical people and the people that we're missing, because the data says that 25% of people seek help, but the data is almost entirely taken from figures that are from clinic, and it's when you look at the people who go to clinic, they tend to be urban white middle class women, which is fine. Some of my favorite people are urban white middle class people, but it does mean that we're missing out on a huge other track of the population. And you had made a tweet, Alistair, then it occurred to me that I had never seen anybody in clinic that had a learning disability. So the prevalence of incontinence in that population must be at least equivalent to the general population, which is 1 in 3 women wet themselves, about 1 in 10 people have problems with their bowel control, and 50% of women over the age of 50 have got vaginal prolapse. So I started thinking, well, where are they? Because if they're not coming to see me, who is dealing with this? And the more I looked into it, the more I realised that this is another missing population, which really exasperates me, because the consequences of having incontinence in anybody's life can be enormous. Apart from pain, if you're constipated, the loss of dignity is really, it really affects people's quality of life, and that's universal. Whether you've got a learning disability or not, you deserve to have the dignity of being continent or having your continence managed if you've got problems with it. So I'm really cross that we've missed this group of people. There doesn't seem to be anything in place for them. So I've been ranting about it to myself for the last couple of weeks and we need to do something to sort it out.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you. And I think that probably Sean and I and Kirsty are sat here going, welcome to learn disability practice, where you get annoyed and exasperated about everything.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kirsty.
I think the fact that there's only a small population actually seeking help anyway, without people with learning disabilities, it's such a hard area to then try and get into the learning disability side as well. The big bugbear that gets to me is like when you see adverts on television advertising what they call sexy normal pants that are paper pants for people who are having urinary incontinence. And it's like, there's nothing ever saying this isn't normal, you can get help for this, there's help out there, there's nothing. All they make us, just put up with it and wear these paper pants. And that's a big bugbear that for me, because it's such an easy message that these big companies could get out there. Yes, you'd still make a massive amount of profit, but at the same time, you've got that moral
message that you're getting out there to say, please seek help. You know, there's a big area of healthcare professionals that can help you.
Yeah, that advert was really interesting because the tone of it appeared to normalise incontinence in postpartum women. And the Royal College of Nurses and the Royal College of Midwives banded together and put in a complaint to the Advertising Standards Agency. Unfortunately, physios weren't involved in it, but anyway. The Advertising Standards Agency didn't uphold the complaint, but they did make some recommendations. And to be fair, it was a 10 advert. They do appear to have made some changes in the last year, in that they now have pelvic floor exercises on their website that you can find with one click. And they've got advice on there that is evidence-based. But I do agree with you, the sort of the expectation that, well, if you're having a baby, you're just going to be a bit pishy, it's what happens, is factually incorrect. And if you wet yourself in the last 6 weeks after having had a baby, it doubles your risk of postnatal depression. And if you don't do anything about it, you're likely to still be wetting yourself when the baby's 12 and starting high school. And physio, doing pelvic floor exercises has got a 74% cure rate of stress incontinence within 4 months. And the people that can't be helped just with self-management, if we get them into physio, then we've got an 84% cure rate in 6 sessions. So it's really, I agree, there's a moral issue here. And the normalising of these problems for the general population impacts on people that have got learning disabilities, because there's quite a lot of ageism in this field. You know, well, you're older, you've had a baby, this is what happens. And so for people that have got an intellectual disability, there seems to be a sort of acceptance. Well, you know, they've got these challenges, so we wouldn't expect them to be able to be dry. And I can't see any reason to support that thinking. It's laziness.
You also might have women here that had traumatic births, and that's why they've ended up with a child that has a learning disability. So they may actually have urinary incontinence themselves from the birth. And so if they have a child with it, you know, and a child that's aging, think, well, I've got it. So, you know, this is normal. You know, it's hard to then differentiate.
I think there's such a big public health message that, you know, Elaine has been tackling in a very unique and innovative way. If anybody's not looked at it, have a look at Elaine Miller stand up. It's some of the funniest things that we've ever seen. So incredibly important.
I didn't mention that, did I?
No, you didn't. If anybody hasn't, you know, have a search for Gussie grips. You'll find Elaine dressed as a vulva, literally, you know, a 5-foot odd vulva on stage. But you know,
it's in Alistair.
Sorry,
you get the plugs in, Alistair.
I've been called some big things at work, but then no, not actually dressed as them. And I think, you know, it's comedy, but it's comedy. We use it as our CPD, hence why Elaine is a bit of a heroine or hero in our department. And it's, you know, there's some great messages in there. You know, Sean, we talked about sort of, you know, some people may be sitting there thinking, well, this just applies to mainstream, you know, people with learning disability don't have babies. Well, I'll tell you right now, yes, they do. People with learning disabilities have relationships, they have marriage, they have sex. Yes, people with learning disabilities have sex. I know, shocking, but it's the truth. And pelvic health is important to them. You've been doing some digging around the literature, Sean, and what have you come up with?
Oh, very little, to be honest. And this is what's concerning. We've just heard Elaine, you know, really giving it large on sort of the evidence base, and it's not necessarily there. What I will say is you know, we can't stress how important and how serious sort of pelvic health and sort of incontinence or constipation is for people with learning disabilities. We know that there are reports, and you know, it's reported because of inquests, that people die with from having constipation with learning disabilities, and it's not infrequent, and we have to remember that. So, but in terms of the literature base, we do have in our field anyway, from a nursing perspective, articles on, say, promoting dignity and what have you. But when it comes to, you know, the nitty gritty, I'm sure which Elaine's involved in sort of, you know, those conservative management and physical, what would you call it? Physical therapy, physical interventions. I don't know what you call it. But it's just not there. It's just not there. And I'm sure Elaine's much better at searching databases than I am. But yeah, it's pretty barren.
Elaine, have you managed to trawl up anything else?
Say that again, sorry.
Have you managed to trawl up anything else?
Yeah, there was a report out last August from the Bowel Interest Group, who I think are related to the all-party, the cross-party group at government. And their figures are that in 2019 in England, it's NHS England figures, there were 76,929 people admitted to hospital. So that's 211 a day just because of constipation. And the costs of that is £160 million a year that's been spent. Now, the thing about constipation is, number one, it's really common. Their figures are it's 1 in 7 adults and 1 in 3 children, and most of it is completely preventable. So if we have, the challenge with constipation is people don't know what normal bowel function is. So I would really like to see this stuff in school so that we have our young people leaving school knowing what normal poo, normal peeing and normal sexual function is. If they know what they can reasonably expect from their genitals, then they will know that if they haven't been for a poo for 3 days, then they're possibly constipated. There's a thing called the Bristol stool chart, which is like a drawing of what a good jobby looks like, that you could put that up in toilets and people would then look at their poo and they get a lot of information from the actual appearance of it. If it's all sort of crumbly and looks like little pellets, then you maybe need to eat a bit of fibre and drink a bit more. So in the olden days, bowel management was one of the things that nurses were really, really hot on, because it's part of basic care. It's part of basic care and basic dignity. And in some areas, it seems to have gone by the wayside, because since my career has happened, then the roles have changed. So nurses are doing much more complex things. You've got, when I first qualified, there wasn't really many physios that even had a PhD. The academic side of things has really changed, and there's been a blurring of what was a junior doctor's role when I first qualified and what the multidisciplinary team are now doing. And for some populations, bowel management has slipped off the radar because it's not that interesting. But if you've got somebody who's got a learning disability, who's also got a connective tissue disorder, which is quite common, a lot of these people are quite hypermobile, then they are likely to be more prone to getting constipated. And if they've also got a communication challenge, they can't tell you that their tummy hurts. So it becomes quite complex, because what you'll see is a change in their behaviour that I don't know what happens in learning disabilities because I can't find any data in it, but there's quite a lot of data from the older population with people that have got dementia, who are obviously a very different population from people with learning disabilities, but some of the challenges are parallel. And those people end up being medicated to manage their behaviour when the problem is a medical issue. There should be somebody thinking, she hasn't had a poo for a week. Maybe we could do something about that. So if we taught parents this is what normal bowel function is, then they would teach their babies when they're potty training them good practices, and I could be out of a job. If women are sitting straining in the toilet, that's the primary cause of vaginal prolapse. So again, if you've got a group of women who have got that are hypermobile, then their risk of vaginal prolapse increases. And if they've also got a learning disability and they're constipated, I think that there must be thousands of women that have got Down syndrome or other challenges that will have prolapses that are completely unmanaged.
Yeah, certainly.
Who's ever looked?
That's the thing. I don't, from what I've done some literature sessions as well around this, and Kirsty and I have talked for years, and haven't necessarily found anything. So this is something we definitely thought it was worth bringing to the light. You mentioned before, and I put a tweet out about it, looking at some figures, if you have a learning disability, you're 275 times more likely to be put on laxatives. Mm-hmm. Now, don't tell me that is a result of a medical need, that is a result of mismanagement. And I think for learning disability practice, I think convenience and routine may have come in front of the sort of the support and the structure that's required to get a bowel program in place for somebody to try and get that person to be continent, to support that person that they can take ownership of their own continence. What we more focus on is, we'll pad people up, and that's just how it is. And we don't necessarily have any goals to try and work towards some form of continence or some form of communication around understanding when I need the toilet or understanding when I need help, or being able to communicate that. People with disabilities have a broad spectrum of needs, yes. But have we as practitioners, so are we hiding behind the dignity argument a little bit in sort of saying, well, you know, to put somebody on the toilet for 10 minutes and make them stay there is again a deprivation of liberty. Well, okay, you know, we all know that dolls, as a, you know, as a letter of the law and things like a lot of the legal side of things around frameworks around learning disabilities, they're easy to hide behind. That's the best way of putting it. They're easy to say we can't do that because of X. Actually, you look at best interest. What is in the best interest of that person? If there's a chance that that person can be continent, can have ownership of their own, you know, bladder and bowels, then I would say that it is proportionally in their best interest to you know, have that supported regime. And these are all sort of buzzwords that we're scared of, I think, in learning disability. It's all about not become wishy-washy and not become anti-clinical, because I'm not, you know, I'm massively a big advocate of the social model, but I think we can forget the therapeutic and the support side of helping people. So yeah, I think that's something we can all reflect on, I think, as practitioners.
Just to put that in a little bit of context for people who are watching, I think is an important point, you know, to add a bit of context there, is the fact that we are possibly, I know as a student learning disability nurse, worried about institutionalization and institutional behaviors, where you know, I'm sure many of the older adults we work with, you know, would have been accustomed to things like routine toileting, etc. Now, obviously we've got to be mindful of that, but I'm sure as Elaine may be able to comment or elaborate on, you know, some of these bowel management programs or what have you, you know, where there is a routine element to them, are normal for the general population. Is that correct? So
yeah, absolutely. That there's a reflex that happens if you've had a meal, then it stimulates your bowel. So what your granny used to do would be give you your breakfast, her children their breakfast, and then sit them on the toilet, sit them on the potty, and see what happens. June Brown is a nurse, a continence nurse who works primarily with children, and she developed a really clever regime for babies with Down syndrome, and she was getting them to sit on potties really early so that they got used to sitting on the potty. They got used to associating pee and poo with the feeling of being on the potty. And when I say young, I mean like from 6 months, so that they got. Toilets can be really challenging environments because they're usually cold, they're very echoey, all the sensory stuff that goes on in a toilet is weird compared to where you want to be normally. If your feet don't sit on the floor, you know, if you're too little or your legs aren't long enough to actually touch the floor, then you're kind of dangling and it's a bit of a balance challenge. So a lot of people that have got sensory sensitivity or some sort of learning disability or that are neurodiverse, find toilets as an environment really difficult. So what June's work was doing was getting these infants used to the idea of managing sitting on a potty, and they became dry. Like, it's amazing. Her work has really revolutionized my thinking in what we can achieve with these kids. And I was at a conference last week, online, with the Association of Continence Advisors, where she was presenting this work. And somebody in the chat box said that they were a physio and they'd had a referral for a guy who was 40 years old who had Down syndrome and had never been toilet trained. He was always in nappies. So within 2 weeks, they had him completely continent day and night. There was never any need for him to be on nappies. It was just nobody had thought that it was appropriate for him. He was written off, which is just outrageous. This is basic tenet. If what we're trying to do is improve people's quality of life, why are we not giving them the basic dignity of seeing if they can be dry? Because apart from anything else, if you're constipated, it increases your risk of urinary tract infections, of piles, which if you've ever had them, they're really hard, they're exquisitely painful. You can get anal fissures and rectal prolapse. And all of these things are preventable if you keep an eye on how often the person is pooing. So yeah, I would have everybody on a bowel regime so that they are noting how often they go, they work out what their normal is. Normal is anything between pooing 3 times a day and once every 3 days. Anything outwith of that is not normal. And being able to recognise that they're actually drinking enough and having enough time on the toilet with their feet supported, because people tends to be women with young children, they don't take enough time on the loo, so they actually have incomplete emptying, and then they land up with an issue. And if you're constipated, the majority of people that I see in clinic, they present because of urinary incontinence, because it's less embarrassing to talk about being a bit pishy than it is about pooing yourself. But the problem is they're constipated. And because of the way that the anatomy is, the rectum's right next to your bladder and it nudges it all the time if it's full. So you have to sort the bowel out first. I'm really exasperated by this. Like, it should be bread and butter stuff for this population.
Also thinking about when you're saying about, spending time on the toilet and the importance of it. We have a lot of our learners that come to us and their weight bearing's been stopped, so they no longer use a standing frame, they no longer walk because it's been thought, they've reached vehicle development, therefore the importance of weight bearing isn't there anymore. And it's, thinking about, well, actually, your internal functions, your bowel and bladder movements, when you're upright, when you've not got that pressure continuously on your bottom when you're sat on it, moving around in a walking frame, it's not functional, the walking that we're going to do with them. They're not going to carry it on at home. But actually, for the importance of bowel and bladder function, it's so, so important. And there's a lack of importance related to that side of it. It's all about kind of you've developed. But what about your internal systems? Yeah,
certainly. There's so many benefits. And
yeah,
Kirsty and I will tell you, our department is probably the worst smelling department in the entire college. People don't know. And that's not due to either Kirsty or my issues. We're getting a lot of people who are in chairs, not necessarily active potentially, and we get people moving. Farts are a occupational hazard, and bowel movements are an occupational hazard. And we've become quite adept at supporting people to clean up. We get people changed to go in. If I can just show you our very nice hydrotherapy facility, which is also another great stimulant to support bladder and bowel function. So I think Kirsty's completely right. And if you look at, I tweeted a picture last week around somebody with severe scoliosis, and how is that person supposed to try and poo, and there's a document which I shared with you guys, and was dying for a poo, and it's like a punny take on words, but as Sean said, it's people die from this, And before that, it gets to the point where you are vomiting feces. This is not, it's always, we can sort of, try and make light heart of it, but it's tucked up as an LD, and people are dying and vomiting poo. So their quality of life before they do die is just incredible. I couldn't even imagine. So in terms of, sorry, go Sean.
No, and just to bring it to a point which, obviously looking at the literature, but looking at local policy and what have you, and national policy, there are, it is written, that people with learning disabilities, where, there may be an expectation that they may have issues with bladders or their bowels, that they should be considered, referral to specialist services. They should be, they should be seen in mainstream services. They should have support. And as Elaine alluded to at the beginning of this conversation, she's not seeing these people. So what's going wrong? Why aren't people being referred? Why aren't, when there's that expectation within the guidance, both national and local?
Are we not flagging it up as practitioners? That's I think for all of us.
And how can we get to a bigger population? How can we get to these bigger groups and try and disperse the message elsewhere? Should we be looking at specialist exercise clubs, so like Special Olympics, special hockey clubs, where we've got where we've got a big population of people with learning disabilities, to try and if we get it high, if we get a lot of people in one go, then hopefully we can get the message spread a lot easier.
Well, Elaine's got plans, haven't you?
Yeah, that's it. The good thing about the people that you work with is that there's a really established network of support systems that are really dynamic and interesting, because we were talking, Alistair, about the Special Olympics, and my background's in sports stuff. I used to get paid to travel around the world and work with fit young men, which was quite nice. It'd be creepy now that I'm nearly 50, but at the time it was a lot of fun. And the thing about sports is it's all about micro advantage. The sport industry ploughs billions of pounds into designing bikes that are just slightly more aerodynamic than the previous bike. And there has been absolutely no attention until recently on continence in our athletes. So female athletes, there was some work done in the 2012 Ordinary Colner Garden Olympics, and they found that 98% of the elite trampolinists, female trampolinists, wet themselves, and 100% of the French netball team wet themselves. Now, those women think it's normal. The coaches aren't aware of it because the women aren't telling them about it. And so you get into this cycle of ignorance because we're not giving the information out, factually correct information and advice out to the nation. So these people that are trying to get elite performance out of this individual athlete, what could you achieve if she wasn't worrying that she was going to wet herself on the global stage? So because you've got the Special Olympics, and it's the same sort of thing, it's about performing, it's about taking part and achieving something that's remarkable for you. Well, can you achieve more if you're not worried about using an appy, which you may not require? So because you've got these really good, well-established networks, and it would appear to me that the families that I know that have got people with learning disabilities, they're all clued into these networks. So it'd be quite easy to put a document together saying, this is how a bowel works, this is what happens when you poo. And the people's family themselves won't understand this because nobody's ever told them. And it's really interesting. Bums are fascinating and bladders are fascinating. So if you say, this is the mechanics of what happens, this is how to make it easier for you and for your family member, try it for a month and see what happens. I bet it'll change your life. And the parents will be like, oh my, that was magic. Every morning having a really good, satisfying poo, it sets you up for the day instead of something that's torturous and making you squeak in the bathroom. So if the parents find the benefit of it, then, or the family and friends feel that it improves their quality of life, which the evidence is solid for, then they're more likely to be engaged and try it with the person that's got the communication challenge or whatever their difficulty is. So I'm fairly sure that you could put things together quite quickly and get the population group themselves engaged in, because poo's funny. That's how I landed up writing a comedy show. It's not difficult to make funny. In fact, look, I've got a cushion. Like, the poo emoji is it's globally recognised. It doesn't matter how old you are, what your challenges are. Everybody understands the poo emoji. So Eric, the charity that supports children with continence issues, Eric it's called, it's got a very, very good website, and they've got some really nice animations of a poo character and a pee character that I think, although it's for, I'm a bit uncomfortable with saying that for the people with learning disabilities, we need to refer to paediatric resources and to resources for people that are elderly, because that's not, it just really makes me feel really uncomfortable. But the fact of the matter is that those groups have similar, like, parallel issues. So the resources are probably, we don't have anything else to try.
And
so
then, you directed me towards those resources, and I don't mind saying that I watched the kids' stuff and was like, oh, I learned something from that. So because we aren't taught it. And I think, we talked about getting the message out there of people who are listening now. It'd be really good if you could spend a bit of time just talking through the mechanics of that. My personal experience of pelvic health comes from a manual evacuation of an 84-year-old lady on an A&E placement as a student nurse, and a 1-hour lecture at university. I don't know if you're...
So I didn't have anything at university, and I was lucky enough to get a women's health elective placement as a student for a month, and that was my lot. Yeah, there was nothing taught at university.
Sean, anything your end?
As a student nurse, as you know, it was, you know, it is considered a fundamental. We have had bowel and bladder study days and a program of study, which has actually been really, really good. We've been very fortunate with our lecturer delivering that, because that's her area. But you know, even she said and says, you know, it's excuse the pun, but you know, it's crap.
So while we've got a world-renowned expert on, while we've got a time, Elaine, can you talk us through the sort of the pelvis, the mechanics of bladder and bowel, and you know what it's like, what you should be doing, and what you should be looking for, and what's normal and what's not normal, if that's all right.
Yes, I would love to, because it's my favourite thing to talk Keith. So normal bowel function is, I think I just said, pooing anywhere between 3 times a day and once every 3 days is normal range. So you need to know what is normal for you, and what's normal for you might not be normal for the next person. Anything beyond that means that there's something going on, the majority of which can be managed conservatively. So the way that a poo happens is really clever. So if you think about your bum hole, and then you've got your anus going up into your rectum where the poo sits. So your colon produces the poo, and then it sits in your rectum. And once that's full, then you get a message saying that you need a poo. You need to go and find a toilet. But there's this little line of nerves up at your anus at the point where there's an internal sphincter that taste what's above it. So they can tell whether it's a gas, a liquid, or a solid, these little nerves, and they can reject the poo. So if there's nowhere appropriate to go, then they can defer the urge, and the urge to poo just vanishes completely for a while. Or they can tell whether it's a gas and a solid, and they can reject the solid but let the gas out. It's so clever. It's absolutely fascinating. So that's how you get this sense of urgency, that if you've got, if you're going to have diarrhea, you know that it's liquid. There's no doubt in your mind. There's no, I wonder if I need to hurry to the toilet. You get a message right now, you have to rush to go to the toilet. And if it's a solid product that you don't have anywhere to go, then you can carry on your day until you've got time to go and sit in the loo. The problem with deferring, though, is that once the poo goes back up into your colon, it absorbs, the colon absorbs more water from the waste. So it gets harder and it gets jaggier, and it becomes more difficult to pass. So for people who don't make time to sit in the toilet and actually open their bowel properly, they can land up with this solid structure that becomes more and more difficult. And you see that a lot in children because they're a bit constipated and it hurts. So they avoid letting the poo out because it's painful. The longer that they hold on to it, the worse it becomes. So we want people to go to the toilet, eat some breakfast, and then go and spend 10 minutes sitting in the toilet and see what happens. If everybody did that, then I genuinely would be out of a job. When you're pooing, poo position makes a difference. We see less people with bowel problems in this sort of like mechanical way in countries where they have squatting toilets, because one of the pelvic floor muscles loops around your colon. There's a kink in it halfway up your bum hole that helps with your continence, because it's hard to poo around a right angle. And then when you squat, this muscle straightens the kink. So it's straight and it's much easier for the poo to come out. So that's why the squatting position is mechanically much better. And it's what you see infants doing. You know that a toddler is about to do a poo because they drop down onto their hunkers. But on Western toilets, you don't get your knees up higher than your hips, so this kink never quite straightens out, and it's more difficult to poo around the corner, particularly if you're constipated. So the advice is to get your feet up onto a stool so that your knees are higher than your hips. Just a couple of loo rolls would do. If you take a toilet roll and you put it on its end and you put your feet up on there, then that can be enough just to increase the angle at your hips. There's a number of products that you can buy. You can get stools that are shaped to sit around your toilet, but an ordinary cheap IKEA kick stool, other brands are available, would do the trick. But just a loo roll is enough if you've got nothing else. And that in itself can make it easier to poo. That's what potties do. You know, the potties are low down so that the baby's knees are above their hips. It's really important. But because we don't tell people that in school, then adults don't know about it, and we sit infants onto an adult toilet and the wee legs are dangling free. Or people who have got physical disabilities, you know, if they've got a tone problem, it's really difficult to get them comfortable in a Western style toilet. And sometimes all you have to do is just give them something to rest their feet on, and then they're able to relax. And the drop of tone in that itself means that then they're able to have a bowel movement. If you're anxious, it's really difficult to have the poo. Makes sense, doesn't it? So apart from that, the dietary changes that you can make, you know, making sure that you're not dehydrated and that you're eating something that's got fibre in it is obviously really important. And that can be difficult for children that have got, you know, sensory sensitivities. There's foods that they want to avoid, or they're just not keen on the taste of vegetables. And the same thing will apply to people with learning disabilities, because some people have got a really limited palate, really limited diet, and that becomes fundamental care, because if you are dehydrated, then the poo is going to hurt. It's more likely to hurt, so you're more likely to avoid it. And you can get, if you keep deferring, then you can land up with a column of poo that's solid, and then the waste matter liquefies around it and comes out as incontinence, as fecal incontinence. And it's called overflow incontinence, that, and it is the most rancid stuff that I have ever come across. It's like rotting poo. It absolutely stinks, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's not a continence issue. It's not something you can fix with pelvic floors. It's something that needs to be medically managed. So if you've got somebody that's continually soiled and is just, their underwear is constantly smeared in this foul smelling stuff, then they are definitely constipated. There's reported cases where they've written up x-ray, because you would normally do an x-ray to see the extent of the constipation, and this stuff is calcified in people's tummies, called a fecalith. It's absolutely horrific. And these are always people with a communication challenge. It's always somebody that is unable to say, my belly really hurts, this is really uncomfortable, and it just gets missed. Just, you know, they might land up on I've forgotten the word, laxatives. That bowel interest group figure says that 74% of elderly people in care homes are on laxatives. And I agree with you, Alistair, it's mismanagement. That is not always a medication issue. If you get people up, get them moving, get them eating and drinking well, give them time to toilet them on a regime, then a significant number of those people will be better. For people that have got other causes of fecal incontinence, constipation is the primary one, and the next big group is women that have got birth injuries. So if you've got a tear that goes down to the sphincter, 3rd or 4th degree tear, then they should automatically be referred to physio for rehab, but it doesn't always happen, because they are pretty much guaranteed to have problems for a period of time. And again, it's just telling them the basic advice about, this is how your bowel works, this is how to take as much of the strain off of it as possible until the injury's got a chance to heal. The other thing that's really useful is abdominal massage in constipation. There's some good work being done at Glasgow Caledonian University looking at people that have got multiple sclerosis as the patient group that they're working on, and it's remarkable. It's really brilliant that the mechanical effect of rubbing somebody's tummy, increasing the blood flow and stimulating their bowel externally makes them have a jobby. And it's free, and there's no side effects. It's a nice thing to do for somebody. Why would you use laxatives when you could just rub their tummy for a wee while?
I think that is something that's on looking at the standards for learning disability physios. I think that abdominal massage is something that's identified on there. In my experience, I don't necessarily know how widely it's practiced, if I'm honest. And I think that sort of brings us nicely on sort of the next point, which we want to talk about, which was in a kind of a, whose role is it anyway? Who do we ultimately defer to as practitioners? Do we see it as a nursing role? Do we see it as a physio role? Or are we going to do the classic thing where we say, well, it's all of our roles and nobody takes any sort of ownership of it? Do we say we need a collaborative pathway? Is there one? We're all sat here, but it's just 3 or 4 of us who've been researching this over the last couple of weeks. There may be things happening out there, and as Sean, as I said, we're more than happy to be corrected on any of the things or pointed in directions of good practice and things that are happening. So if we're sat here and you're watching your screens right now screaming, you don't know about this, then please get
Let us know. Let us know. I mean, it's we're all asking sort of genuine and sincere questions, and it's just, as we've all highlighted, it's very difficult to get that information. So if it is happening out there, just get in touch with us. We're not criticizing anyone. We're just curious.
And
Which is the point. If it is out there and I can't find it, and I'm a real geek when it comes to this stuff, it can't be easy to find because I'm actively looking for it. So whoever's produced, if there is there, then who are they trying to target? Because if you've got a family member that you're trying to get help for this, it has to be easily accessible, which is why your excellent networks that you've got with MenCap and within the arts and all of these different resources that you've got could put out something that would be really simple but would actually change lives for very little effort.
And I think that's an important point to make. I mean, obviously I'm just a student, but if I was in practice, then I would be referring, well, ideally to someone like you, Elaine, if needs be, and working with you. So if you're saying that you're struggling to find it, then there's a disconnect somewhere.
Well, Sean, if you're just struggling to find it and you've got a Blue Athens account through university, then what hope is there for the rest of us? You know what I mean? I think, us guys have been spending the last week trawling literature and the internet for information around this. So if there is something out there, then you need to work on your marketing and branding, but please pass it our way. I think on the balance of probability, we can certainly suggest that we don't think there is anything out there happening.
But I think the evidence is there in terms of the fact that the figure about the rate at which laxatives are prescribed. I'm sure that sort of counts as a bit of evidence there.
I think so. It's another one with 60% of people with Down syndrome across the whole spectrum of age prescribed laxatives. And a lot of you who know me or follow me on social media know I'm very pro exercise, and I'm certainly big that exercise is a great form of prevention and is not offered in an adaptable way to people with learning disabilities. And I do wonder if people were supported to be up and active, how much that would support, improved bladder and bowel health. So if you look at all these small things around, well, let's give people some time on the toilet, let's give people a structure, let's educate people about what normal bladder and bowel health is, and let's do some exercise. None of these things are groundbreaking, earth-shattering things. They're all small little things.
I think another important thing is we get a lot of complex posture people who are in pads that don't have toileting equipment because they're in pads. So why would they need toileting equipment? But obviously, if they have that specialist molded toilet chair that they have time to sit in, because you can't just sit them on the toilet, they'll fall off of it. And it's that funding as well of thinking, forward thinking. Okay, well, they're not continent at the moment. However, if we provided this piece of equipment and followed this program, then that might be something we're looking at in the future. And also increasing their quality of life and reducing their costs on the NHS because they don't need to be treated for constipation because they've got the equipment in place and they're using it.
And it's so interesting to sit and listen to this and think about, the number of professionals in learning disability practice that are involved in supporting somebody to go to the toilet, a nurse from a health point of view. We were bringing in OTs from a toilet in and seating point of view and the practicalities, bringing in speech and language to talk about, well, let's talk around the communication and what's your understanding around of it. We're doing physios for abdominal massage and exercise. I do worry that, with that sort of smorgasbord at a time when services are being chopped, that it leaves people high and dry, or not, as the case may be. And that, which is yet again, as we always come back to, makes the case that we need to speak up more for our job roles, what we do, define what we do better, be able to talk about that and be able to, put some data behind that. Elaine, we've got some great ideas coming out of this, and hopefully it's something that we can take further around, looking at, some little pilot things around, how can we support more people with learning disabilities to become confident.
I think the problem with all of these things is that they are, number one, embarrassing, and number two, they're boring. This is the basics that you were taught in your first week or as an undergrad. Everybody knows this stuff in their own day-to-day function. They understand about peeing and pooing. They might not have great complex understanding about the actual mechanics of it, but it's something that they do. And so it kind of gets forgotten about, kind of gets taken for granted, because it's not glamorous. You're not going to get, you know, awards and things for your service, making sure that everybody has a jobby every day, but actually it's really very, very important. And when you look at the costs that are being wasted because we're not paying attention to something that is a bit routine, it's outrageous. Australia had a study that they did in 2010 where they looked at the cost of incontinence as a whole in the whole population, and they calculated it was $43 billion a year, because they didn't just look at the cost of pads and medication, GP visits and surgeries. They also included things like falls. So if you're worried you're going to wet yourself, you hurry to the toilet. And if you're older and it's nighttime and you're a bit stiff and your eyes aren't adjusted to being in the dark, you're more likely to fall. And if you're 85 and you fall and break your hip, you've got a 25% chance of being dead in a year. So what's happening with your people? Because some of them have got mobility issues. So is it contributing to their balance disorder? Is it contributing to their falls that they're having? And this stuff is fixable for very, very little effort. And if you do your pelvic floor exercises, it cures the majority of simple stress incontinence, and it probably makes your orgasms better. And you know that really shouldn't be a hard sell, even to people with learning disabilities.
What was the hashtag we came up with? Everybody's interested in not shitting themselves and having an orgasm, I think was that one. We're going to get some shirts made with it, I think. I'm not sure it'll take off, but anyway. What I want to sort of draw things together now and just sort of look at, you know, what can we learn as LD practitioners or practitioners working with people with learning disabilities from mainstream services? Elaine, how do pathways work within mainstream services, and you know that we can look at replicating or adapting? Because one of our great skills as people with working with learning disabilities is to be able to take something from mainstream services and mold it and flex it and make it work, or you know, try and support people to make that pathway work. So how does it work for you?
What should happen, what the NICE guidelines say happens, is if a person presents at the GP clinic saying that they've got a problem with their continence, the GP can refer them to the specialist service in all areas of the NHS. Now, some areas are under such pressure that if it's fecal incontinence, they have to see a colorectal consultant before they get referred to physio. But that's a political issue. Good practice would be that they're seen very quickly by a specialist physio. In some areas you can self-refer. So if you Google your local health authority area and continence service physiotherapy, then it'll throw up a phone number that you can just phone up for yourself or for a family member. The challenge with it is that there's not enough of us, as usual. We don't actually know how many specialist physios there are in pelvic health because there isn't a central register, which is a bit bonkers. There's about 900 people that are members of the POGP, which is a helpful website. It's a professional network for physios that specialise in this field, but you don't have to be a member of the POGP. So there's lots of people that are working in the NHS with loads and loads of experience and expertise. They're just not members of this organisation. So that's why we don't know how many of us there are. Other really good resources online is www.pelvicfloorfirst.org.au. It's an Australian site, and it's really the best one that I've come across. It's got up-to-date information, so everything's evidence-based. It's not the nonsense that you'll get if you go and Google Goop, whatever. I mean, anyway, let's not get this. That's going to divert things slightly. So it's evidence-based. The way that it's written is really accessible. They use simple language that's very clear. There's some really good videos about how to adapt exercise so that they're pelvic floor safe. It's a really good resource. The other one that's very useful is ERIC. www.eric.org.uk, and it's the charity that supports children that's got continence issues, but actually the information that's on there applies to adults as well, and it's really simple. The bowel and bladder programs that they've got are helpful, and for adults that have got sensory sensitivity or balance problems and neurodiversity as well, they have sections on that to help children, and they would apply to adults too. So I think those are the best resources at the moment. But and there's an app as well. The problem with pelvic floor exercises is it's really hard to remember to do them. So there's an app called Squeezy, which is a great name, and it'll flag up on your phone, but it's evidence-based. But apart from that, I think the problem is there's so much misinformation out there. So these are the sites that I know are evidence-based and kept up to date and are reliable. But I would really like to see something developed specifically, because I don't know any Makaton. So if I have somebody that comes with a learning disability, how am I actually going to ask the questions? Am I going to land up talking over them because I need the carer to give me the actual information? So we as a specialist group should have basic understanding of these communication tools that you all know backwards. I have never been shown it. So I'm going to have a chat with my peers, my professional peers, and see if we can do something about this. And I would really like to pull something together that we could just trial, just make the resource, give it out, see if we can get some information back, see if you can find a case study to write up and get it published, because I've been surprised at how easy it's been to get press on something that's so embarrassing just by writing press releases. And it's because people are interested in not pooing themselves. And the orgasm thing helps. So it's not a big job to do. It would just be trying to get the sort of grassroots of people that are in this area that it applies to their lives interested enough to tweet it. You need a good hashtag, and to get one of the or more of the groups that work with this population, like MenCap, involved. If we could get them on board to trial it for a month on social media, it wouldn't be a big job.
So I think it's a challenge to everyone out there who's looking at this, to retweet and tag in groups or people that you think either maybe have knowledge in this area or think maybe able to help and support us, so that we can try and get this together. Because I think, as we've all talked about, you can probably see this is an incredibly important area. In the YouTube description below, what I'll try and do is I'll get the links to the websites that Elaine and apps that Elaine has mentioned, and I'll put links to them in the description. So that you just be one click away from some more information. As always, please give us some feedback and what your thoughts are, whether you think it was useful. We've got somebody who actually knows what they're talking about this time, or a couple of people that know what they're talking about this time. So it's not just me and Sean shouting into a cave. Just before we wrap up, is there anything else anybody wanted to add in relation to any of the points we've talked about?
Yeah, I'm going to add something. Which I think needs saying. So obviously I'm a student learning disability nurse, and until starting discussions with Elaine, I didn't know what a pelvic health physio was. And I think that illustrates some of the problem we've got, where we're all for MDT, even students, we're all for MDT working into professional education, and yet there's something which is there's a group of professionals which are valuable, and simply I don't. So yeah, it's been interesting and worthwhile. But yeah, I should have known, shouldn't I?
No, I think we're not very good at telling people. I think that we as a group are poor at banging our own drum and saying, actually, we're really, really good at this. It's partly because usually in the department we've got our own room with a door, because obviously you're getting people to talk about things that are very intimate and they need privacy, and so we tend to go into our room and deal with things and then leave again. There's not, even within physio, there's not much crosstalk. We as a group need to be better, I think, at saying, actually, this really matters and we're the people to deal with it. The problem is everybody's so busy. It's like you were saying, whose job is that? Whose role is it to do outreach and to go and find the people that are missing? Because your job is dealing with a busy clinic list and PPE and all of these things. It's not specifically a person's job to go and find the folk that we're not reaching. And we should be.
Person's job, is it? Is it, like Sean just said, it is a huge MDT. Because when you were saying about not knowing the Makaton, also if you've got speech and language therapists involved, they can give you advice on Makaton, they can give you advice on what's the appropriate level to be going in there communication wise for that person. And also you've got OT in there, who then you've got the advice on equipment, their special point to bring into it. But again, you're looking at time pressures, you're looking at, it's a sensitive issue. Do you want all this big MDT in a room with somebody? But it's also considerations to have, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
So just before we wrap up, Elaine, this is sort of time where, if anybody wants more further information, they can find us on Twitter. Sean and I's handles have been out there quite a lot. Elaine, what's the best place to find you?
I'm at Gussie Grips on Twitter, GussieGrips. The French show that I wrote is called Gusset Grippers, so that's why Gussie Grips. And on Instagram, because I didn't understand how social media works, it's Gusset_grippers on Instagram, which is really hard. I much prefer Twitter. but do get in touch, and I'm trying to remind people to do their exercises on social media, so if you follow me, I'll nag you.
I was going to say, instead of that app, you just need to follow Elaine on social media, because you do get all these random pelvic related photos as prompts to do your pelvic floor exercise, and it certainly does remind me. And I'd normally suggest at this point, Elaine, if there's any sort of tours or anything coming up, normally you can, but at the moment, yeah. Exactly. Elaine's been working on knitting recently, I understand.
Yeah, I wish. I was supposed to be going on tour, but maybe next year. You never know. I'm writing a pantomime because the comedy show worked, and I did some work with the university in Melbourne. We've written a paper looking at using humour as a health promotion tool. And the problem with the Fringe show is, it's as a piece of work goes, I know it's all right because it won a comedy award, but very few people go and see live comedy, but everybody goes to the panto. So my plan is to have this pantomime that's called Leaking Beauty and tour that round the areas of social deprivation, geographically remote areas and culturally diverse areas, because those are the people that are missing from the data, and everybody goes to the panto. So that's my plan. I'm having so much fun because it's just very, very silly.
I cannot wait to see that. I cannot wait. And then I'm right in seeing you're looking at trying to get a conference together early in the new year.
Yeah, me and some colleagues, Emma Brockwell, who's a running specialist, and collaborated on some new guidelines for postnatal women returning to running after having had their baby, and Myra Robson, who's responsible for Squeezy. We set up it's just a collaboration really called Pelvic Roar, because the stuff that's not working in your population is also not working in a whole bunch of others. And instead of just complaining to ourselves, we decided to try and platform stuff. So we're having a conference online on the 30th of January. So if you want to, if it's helpful, if you look on Facebook, there's a closed Facebook group for Pelvic Roar. If you just apply to join it, we've limited it to people that work with people, so like healthcare professionals or fitness instructors or yoga instructors, because they're the people that the general population go to. They don't come to GP, they don't come to physio, they go to an adult shop and they go to Pilates. So we kind of want to collaborate with those folks so that we can scoop up these subclinical people. But the talk on the conference is an all-day thing, and we've got some really excellent speakers, and it's aiming at people that are not specialists but have got an interest and want to learn more in the field. And we're doing it as a charitable fundraiser because we haven't got a bank account and we don't really know what we are yet, whether we're a charity or a social enterprise or what. So we're just going to run it and then figure the detail out later on. So if you look at Pelvic Roar on Facebook, then you'll find the details there.
It'd be remiss of me not to mention the one that's coming up in March as well. That's for the Therapy Live. Pelvic health as well. So that's another conference that's focused on pelvic health, the general population. You may be featuring in that one as well, Elaine. Am I correct?
Yeah, and I'm doing a talk on how to assess a pelvic floor without doing an internal.
Excellent.
Which is not difficult to do, and we should all be doing it.
Incredibly important in learning disabilities as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And Kirsty, you are on social media, a bit of a lurker, aren't you?
I tend to more Facebook than Twitter because I don't understand it, and Instagram apparently I'm selling some knockoff sunglasses, so yeah, that's not me.
Kirsty's one of the members, the senior physiotherapists here at Portland College, and we all happy we've got social media Portland_physio. I'm at the LD Physio. Sean. Oh, fantastic. Sean, are you on mute, mate?
My fault. So my Twitter handle, as people probably know by now, is at Sean_LD nurse, or it's possibly the other way around without looking. And I'm still a student learning disability nurse.
Excellent, excellent. Elaine, Kirsty, thank you ever so much for joining
Thank
us,
you very
and we
much.
will see you all again next time. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye, everyone.